I think that was what was lacking from the equation before. And once we entered in and got the user incentive or the user interest into this balance, maybe the system got more humanized in that sense that you actually have to include and get into, like, calculate basically what's the user reaction to different behaviors. And I think if you look at, like, evidently, if you look at how ad forms are appearing nowadays in comparison to how they were, let's say, 6-7 years ago, you see the difference. Yeah, totally.
Welcome to another episode of Information and Value. My name is Julian Leitloff and I'm your host. In this video podcast, we're talking about the development of the web, some wrong turns it took, and how we can get to a more decentralized version of it. Today, I'm talking to Rotem Dar, who is a part of eyeo, a company that is better known for their flagship product, Adblock Plus. eyeo is actually really interesting because it's one of the pioneers of the alternative ad tech scene, and we're going to dive into how the ad market has evolved and what threats we see. Rotem is actually a lawyer by training, which makes it really interesting because he has some things to say about platforms that own 60 to 70% of the whole ad market and how eyeo is positioning itself there. Also interesting insight, the Adblock company sees that the free web relies on ad revenue and has a solution to it. Let's tune into the interview. Rotem, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So we usually start the show with just a very quick question. What's your most favorite gadget, tech gadget that you're using?
Ooh, wow. That's a great question because I don't really use that many gadgets. I would say smart TV. That's a very boring answer.
What shows do you watch?
Oh, I watch mainly YouTube recently. Yeah. Since having a kid, I actually don't manage to get track of any, like, TV show to a degree that I would actually want to. It's been crazy 2-3 years almost.
What's your most favorite tech that you're excited about, as in, like, tech trends, if you're looking at IoT or VR or something like that?
Cars. I think, I mean, I don't know, it's crazy because there are so many things happening right now. Starting from like electric cars and basically all this kind of, like, old school tech that tries to clean the world to a degree that like lesser footprint. But I'm also very interested in all these, like, homegoing towers, that you can actually grow, like, different things.
Like the in-house farming.
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Well, touching base on the car industry, that's an industry that got really or is about to get really disrupted. And
already is to some degree, yeah.
And we've seen that with the publishing industry, like quite some time ago. Some would say that this has already happened, and you've been with eyeo since 2015,
right?
So you've seen that first close up.
Well, yeah, I got already in the middle of it, I'd say, because I was already, like, on quite high profile in 2015. When I got to eyeo, it got really close to, like, 100 million acceptable ads users, so devices. But it definitely accelerated since. So I would say the peak got there, like, 2016 probably. That was basically the part where the ad tech industry realized that this is a phenomenon that is there to stay, and this shift between, like, fighting it to accepting it happened during these years.
Maybe just to take a step back for our viewers as well, can you just explain real quickly what eyeo is and what the acceptable ad program is?
Yeah, totally. So eyeo is the operator of Adblock Plus, the most downloaded browser extension ever. And AdBlock Plus, as could be understood from its name, is an ad blocker. And originally, until 2011, it was just like a regular ad blocker in the sense that it just blocked all ads. The establishment of eyeo came with the awareness that in order to have a sustainable web that allows content creators to develop content, we need to find a solution that would allow some sort of content monetization, and that's how the team back then came up with the idea of acceptable ads, which is basically you could compare it to ad light sort of ad appearance. That on one hand is straightforward. It tells users that the ad is actually an ad. It doesn't shout at the user. But on the other end, it's still the monetized web.
So that's interesting that an adblock company is coming to the conclusion that for the free web to work, there needs to be like some kind of monetization as well.
Right.
Just to because you came in 2015, and I mean 100 million is already quite impressive. And from what I could read before the interview, this has actually ballooned quite further in terms of user numbers.
eyeo nowadays is a company that provides technology. It provides technology for browsers that wants to improve the user experience in a sustainable and mindful way. And I think the amount of like end users that we have from just like regular old school installation is something like 150. Yeah, that's a crazy
really
number.
Impressive.
Yeah, that's a customer revolution.
So you kind of see where 250 million people, and that they
almost
that they kind of vote by their feet by blocking ads. What do you think? Why are they doing that? I mean, obviously it has become quite intrusive, especially in 2015. Can you just walk us through a little bit how we got to that point and where we are now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a hard message to tell, also to users. I mean, we're kind of like in the middle, in between the publisher or the advertisement world and the user, and we try to bring the user perspective closer to the balance point, so the user would have more reflection in business decision making, so kind of giving a voice to the voiceless in that sense.
I want to dwell a little bit on that question. The question being that how come that the equilibrium for users in the ad market is just so bad?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that to a major degree, the attention of users got commoditized to a degree that incentivized different parties just to create more and more inventory, while if you look at it from a broader level of how the web, like how you get like a sustainable level of measuring of web attention and actually have like a healthy market, the incentive of separated parties to create more inventory of attention, while the incentive of the whole, or like the best interest of the whole industry to have a balanced amount of attention that would allow more engagement from the people that create this economy, just got out of balance. So there were more attention units in form of ads than the market could actually really afford.
This sounds like a resource, like a very passive resource, but we're talking about people actually being active on the web, right?
Yeah, you humanize it now, but I think that was what was lacking from the equation before. And once we entered in and got the user incentive or the user interest into into this balance, maybe the system got more humanized in that sense that you actually have to include and get into, like, calculate basically what's the user reaction to different behaviors. And I think if you look at, like, evidently, if you look at how ad forms are appearing nowadays in comparison to how they were, let's say, 6-7 years ago, you see the difference. Yeah, totally.
You were talking about the equation tilting to an unhealthy balance. When did that happen and why?
Oh, it's hard to put a finger. Some may say that, like, that this process started with the introduction of programmatic bidding, of, like, basically that we're talking about 2009, I think, or 2010. I was still a law student back then.
So programmatic bidding is the practice of just bidding space or attention to the highest bidder as an advertisement.
Yeah, that's the turning point when the market turned from aspects of real estate. I buy this inventory from this publisher, then I'm buying the user attention.
Doesn't matter where the user is at.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we buy eyeballs. You buy basically my attention for less than a second, or doesn't really matter, at a certain point of the day, and the contextuality got less important at that point of time.
So it doesn't matter if it's on the New York Times or if it's in some farming app, a game app.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that doesn't really matter. Then it doesn't really matter how much of that you create, because it could be anywhere. And I think this notion is really seducing if you think about it from an advertiser point of view. Of course, things changed since, and we're talking now, we're doing the post-mortem, or at least the post-mortem of the first form of programmatic bidding.
But what changed with the introduction of programmatic bidding that tilted the equation to a point where it's unhealthy? It's an unhealthy ad market.
Well, again, it's post-mortem because evidently so many users implemented ad blockers.
Well, obviously they didn't like it, but what was the reason for the shift? Or what?
Did you browse the web?
What was the cause?
Yeah, I mean, just the unproportional amount of ads that you were facing every time you were browsing. And other phenomena like malware, and basically once the incentive is to create as much inventory as possible, then every unit, every party in like each and every one of the players that acted in that era was very motivated to create as much ad units as possible.
Because it didn't matter anymore what the quality of the user was.
Because when you do the math at the end of the day, you manage to figure out that you just generate more ad revenue. It's a short-minded notion, of course, because that exhausted the users.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, it worked for a couple of years, 3 years, some years, definitely.
And then, AdBlock Plus basically came in, and you could say it was like an emergency measure for the users to just say, I disagree, and that's not the web that I wanted.
Absolutely. That's the user empowerment that I was mentioning before. The ability of you as a user basically to take an action and say, fix it, otherwise I'm not participating.
So let's take a look at the regulatory angle. This is not so much about the attention, but about the user data. Which basically the EU said, giving more rights into the hands of the user, saying, well, there needs to be a counterbalance. That kind of plays into your gameplay, doesn't it?
It proves that, at least according to legislators in the EU, there's a place to intervene and help users to um, take responsibility or take the rights back. And that you cannot really disconnect the aspect of data from the aspects of ads. The whole revolution of programmatic bidding in edtech was around the aspect of data.
Because without user data, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, of course. Without having a broad understanding of who the individual is, you get back to the starting point, which is you buy real estate and not eyeballs.
And that's something you're tackling now with the new product that you're actually
absolutely
starting. Can you talk a little bit about Crumbs and what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. Crumbs is, from a user perspective, that's a privacy product. It facilitates to users good privacy tools that usually are being marketed for a certain subscription monthly fee, and making it available to users for free usage. But from the other angle, it tries, it actually manages to create available data for programmatic bidding that is anonymized and allows the web and programmatic bidding to still exist. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, for maybe a little fraction of the users, privacy worth paying money for or can be afforded. And the vast majority of users would rather be addressed with ads than actually pay out for content. What we're trying to say is like, okay, so understanding this notion that vast majority of users, and it doesn't really matter what are the psychological reasons for that, rather be addressed by ads, then let's try to provide them with the proper tools to, on one hand, be addressed with ads, but on the other, have transparency and control over the data that is being used to address them.
So you're basically unionizing the users to be their voice and push back in an ad equilibrium.
It's a very nice point of view that I fully agree with. When you, for example, pay $100 per year for Amazon Prime, you basically entitle Amazon to bargain for you and provide you a product that improve the user experience you have while buying online. And that's also sort of unionizing, right? Costco, that's the same business model, that you pay some subscription to a central company that basically arrange for you the rest of the service. And to that degree, AdBlock Plus or Crumbs has some things in common, which is unionizing users to take basically some action that each one as an individual would probably not be sufficient as, but as a joint power
together,
that actually
there's
make
a
a
bargaining
difference.
power. You just touched base on Amazon. Let's talk about the platforms a little bit. So the elephant in the room is that you're catering to a market that is 30 to 40% of the whole ad market. The rest is taken by big platforms. How has that evolved and how is that affecting your business?
It's too early to say. We are all, reviewers of all these all these developments when it comes to privacy and the platforms. On one hand, of course, that giving users more power and more rights, that's something that we support, and we're glad that platforms got to the conclusion that it's important to empower users in this way. It's important to do it in a responsible way that would still leave enough power to different content providers that we all enjoy from and are so important for a significant angle of democracy and freedom of speech. So yeah, let's see how it would evolve, of course.
You're a lawyer by training, and I'm curious to hear from your point of view. If you're looking at the antitrust matter, so the UK government recently published some their standpoint on being very concerned on the concentration in the ad market. You have Tim Berners-Lee, who like years ago already started ringing the alarm bell there. What's your stance from a legal perspective? Do you see it as problematic that the EU hasn't stepped in yet? Is that something that's happening?
It's concerning that few parties are basically dictating how the market is evolved. I think that for innovation in different fields, more competition would have been a bless. So if you think about it that way, and you, for example, you mentioned alternative search engines. Nowadays in the Western world, there are just two companies that generate search results in a commercial level, which are, of course, Google and Microsoft. And the constraints that you have to enter this market are just huge. Now, of course, Google has a very good product when it comes to search. There's no question about it. Same as Amazon have a very good product for online purchasing. The question is whether this sort of advantage also shadows the innovation in other fields, for example, and that's where the problem begins. So, for example, if I want to develop today a new operation system for mobile, my ability to monetize it is very limited, because I can go for Bing, for example, right? I mean, I guess search is like one of the main ways that a platform, that such a product can actually fund itself. That would not be sufficient in Europe, for example, and maybe even not in the US. You can go for Microsoft, so you can go for Google, and I mean, Google would not cut a deal with you.
So you're basically stuck with making potentially a bad deal with one provider.
I'm just saying that
evidently,
outside of the Apple ecosystem, there's only one meaningful mobile operation system, and that's a fact. And we have to think as a society whether this is something that we consider sufficient, or whether we need to somehow incentivize innovation in different fields. And in that sense, it's important that we'll create market conditions that allow this kind of innovation. So we won't be stuck with just one company that provides us all of the solutions altogether.
Yeah. Maybe to talk a little bit about, we've been talking about the regulatory trends that are going on. Maybe you can give us an outlook on what you see happening, and whether, like, if you look at it in 5 years, where you think we're going to stand in the online ad market. Is there anything going to change? And if so, what caused this change to happen?
Maybe. I hope so. We see a process of digitalization of society to a degree that as individuals, our physical self and our digital self becomes closer and closer. Whether it's our medical records, whether it's our identity for different usage within the web, whether it's banking, and soon enough with more connected devices and things that we use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
That would just grow and grow. And it would be interesting to see, like, it's the first time in human history, or at least the documented human history, that we see such a thing. And it would be very interesting to see, like, how we as society and we as individuals react to this process.
Yeah.
And it's important to do it in a responsible way, because it's going to stay here for a long time. And it means that, from my point of view, it will be important to provide individuals with the tools to have some sort of balance and control over this process.
So it's a lot bigger than just the ad market. It's about like how we are represented in a digitalized society.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I've got the privilege of being able to interview people here, most of which actually come and answer questions. Who would you invite if you were on my behalf?
Good question. It's hard for me to say who is the actual person I would invite. What I would like to see in the future is how, for example, this topic becomes an actual part of even the political discourse. You know, like, we are still arguing about the same things in politics, while the actual, like, strong tech aspect of including tech in policies in a meaningful way, so somebody would actually put it in the agenda and try to represent the challenges of the future. Of course, there are attempts by different parties. If you see in the States, like Elizabeth Warren, and there was this tech guy from New York, I forgot his name, Young?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's his name. The Democratic presidential candidate, right?
Yeah.
Andrew,
and I don't know. I'm not
Andrew
familiar
Young.
with him enough to actually say that he would be a role model. But
well, he has been an entrepreneur before, right?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, like, we need politicians to really understand tech.
We need politicians to really understand tech.
Maybe I should invite the European digital minister. She's doing a pretty good job, I think.
Maybe you should. If I had my own podcast, I would have considered that. You've got the power.
Well, let's see if she's going to come. I'm going to ask her, though. Thank you so much for
I can write a
recommendation letter to me.
I would definitely recommend you as an interviewer.
Thanks. Rotem, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. That was another episode of Information and Value, your video podcast that talks about the web, how it evolved, took some wrong turns, and how we can get it to a decentralized version. My name is Julian Leitloff and I'm your host. If you want to take a look at other episodes where we talk to people from the data industry or the early web and prominent figures in the Web 3.0, feel free to take a look at Twitter or YouTube, where we have published some other episodes as well. If you want to get in touch, please feel free to reach out if you have criticism, or even if we did something right. We are very happy to hear from you. We will also start talking about the feedback. So please, reach out, tell me who you would invite here, who you would think is a good guest to talk about these topics. I am very much looking forward to also having you tune in for the next episodes. Thanks for your attention.